Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch another episode for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very, very high pedestal. This transformative experience caused me to create a podcast that is all things mental health. Would it benefit you to hear from mental health professionals and influencers? Would it also add value to your life to hear real-life, authentic stories from people talking about their mental health, the issues they face, and how they actively combat them? If so, you came to the right place. I want to start by congratulating you for making your mental health a priority. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. On this episode, I am happy to introduce my guest, Dr. Diego Hernandez. Diego is a product of networking. As a guest on my other podcast, What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur, referred me to him as a guest who in turn did the same. Dr. Hernandez is a clinical director of art research at USF. A.R.T stands for Accelerated Resolution Therapy Research. An additional area he will hone in on is mental health relating to veterans, which is a first on the show, so I had to have him. Get ready to improve your day with Dr. Diego Hernandez. Dr. Hernandez, thank you for joining my show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Please introduce yourself to our listeners and share part of your story before we dive in and get going. Please share your role relating to mental health as well.
I am a licensed clinical psychologist. As you said, I'm the clinical director of military and A.R.T research at the University of South Florida. Right now, we only have a couple of small studies. I'm also a consultant for some research at the Mayo Clinic, at hospice and the VA. We actually just published our hospice study, which is a 4-session protocol for complicated grief in older adults. The basis of my work actually started in trying to manage my own mental health while I was in college. So I got introduced to yoga, meditation, and we start off in a variety of ways, and we learn to just kind of push, and excel, and even push ourselves beyond our abilities. And that's what we do to accomplish goals. But when it comes to our mental health, we can't push. We have to rest. Our body's designed to rest, to get to a resting state. And this is one of the things that happens with traumatic experiences. They're stored differently in the body. The body gets to an elevated state, and that elevated state starts to record memory differently, just different from our everyday memory. And those are the kind of things that we work with the accelerated resolution therapy. It could be anything from combat to getting hit by a truck. The body, responds to a variety of situations that are intense like that, but also on a very subtle level. If you got pulled out in 3rd grade and embarrassed by your teacher in front of the classroom, and then that memory is a type of learning. And so that becomes sort of like your operating system in the background. So every time you're in a social situation, it's drawing on that experience in some way. And we can work around them, we can work through them, but with the techniques that we have today, we can actually work through those memories. So they're originally designed to work with a traumatic memory. And then in my work with veterans, particularly those in special operations, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, people who are going back into combat. So I started adapting it with sports psychology. And from there, working with these high performers as professional athletes, I've branched it off and started including it with executive coaching, working with professional athletes, working through each of these situations to be able to improve our performance.
That's amazing. I'm glad I had the opportunity to get you on the show. And Dr. Hernandez, something I do on each episode is I share a mental health story of someone who is famous because I want to let you, the listeners, know that you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone may look like they're healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. Today, I will share a special story that involves Barack Obama while he was in office to improve the nation's mental health. While he was in office, he signed the Mental Health Reform, the 21st Century Cures Act, into law. I got all the following great info from the National Alliance on Mental Health website. This act featured vital pieces of the Helping Families and Mental Health Crisis Act of 2016, the Mental Health Reform Act of 2016, and the Mental Health and Safe Communities Act of 2015. So the 21st Century Cures Act was passed to program coordination and improve integration within the federal agencies to serve people with mental illness while also removing unfair barriers to mental health care. Even better, this monumental act also aims to help the needs of the people with mental illness who become entangled in the criminal justice system. And the article also added a few more areas that the act touches on, which includes combat suicide in our schools and communities to save lives. It increases the mental health workforce, so there are more trained professionals available. It toughens the enforcement of the mental health parity law, so health plans are finally held accountable for the coverage paid for. And also it invests in early intervention so people can get the right mental health care at the right time when they need it, along with investing resources, of course, to keep people with mental illnesses out of jails and treatments. But Dr. Hernandez, what do you take away from that most?
A couple of different things. One is that we have the idea of mental health and mental illness. Mental health should apply to all of us, but they tend to get mixed up, pretty often. And there's a lot of things that, on a very basic level that we need to do to sort of adapt to the way our bodies work. One of them is sleep. Sleep deprivation is responsible for just a number of problems. It contributes to auto accidents, worker productivity. It lowers our immune system's ability to respond to things like viruses, it actually slows down the body's ability to heal from injuries and stuff. So that's the mental health part, where we should actually be healthy overall, mind, body, spirit, and stuff like that. And then when you get into mental illness, I actually kind of divide it up into two categories. One is those things that we have sort of evidence for it being a physiological genetic basis, and then the other stuff that doesn't. So, for example, a lot of folks coming out of the military, we talk about post-traumatic stress, and it's great that there's awareness of it. But we're talking about many of the stresses of also military transition. So people can encounter a great deal of internal and external stress during times of transition in their life, even just going from high school to college to work, or losing your job, other things like that. For example, when at the peak of the housing crisis back 2007, 2008, suicides were up like 300%.
Yeah.
And a good portion of those people were in some form of foreclosure. And it wasn't all the people who were foreclosed on were committing suicide. It was often the perception of losing everything, faced with that prospect,
Right.
that increased the rates. So, people can kind of go back with that lens and say, oh, well, they must have had mental illness or whatever too, but we neglect the human factor. It's one of the things that's happened in my profession since the 80s with what was called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Mental Disorders 3, and then 3R. We started basically categorizing these things that were starting to have more, physiological evidence,
Okay.
but categorizing everything as a disease, everything as a disorder, even, so it's like, you're stressed. Oh, you're mentally ill. And that's the problem we've run into with
Right.
the drug companies.
I see that myself.
Everything. It's like, so we're losing sort of the narrative and stories for how we face life's challenges, how we learn from it and get through them. I work, a lot, in Europe during the winter, and no fail, like in England, Ireland. As soon as it starts getting darker and cold, you start seeing these public service announcements where people are telling their stories about how they faced depression and suicide and loss and how they got through it. We don't hear enough of those success stories here, so people just feel bad. We look at the difficulty our first responders, law enforcement, and folks have, because it's like the only framework they have for the help for the stress in the job is, oh, okay, now you have a diagnosed mental illness, you've got post-traumatic stress, when this should actually be part of mental health.
Well, the problem is, in a lot of aspects, it's certainly improving, but mental health was not exactly looked at positively. If there was mental health difficulties going on with somebody, on a few episodes ago, I was interviewing, people aren't so embracing of someone that has mental health difficulties because people are now just speaking up on it. It's very hard to get men to even speak about their mental health. I'm still finding producing this podcast.
Well, yeah, it's because the framework we have for it is that there's something wrong.
Exactly.
We're losing. There's another podcast that I like. It's called The Hidden Brain, and I was listening to the fellow who actually created the GED. And one of the things that he was talking about in his research is that we've removed from the school system a lot of our sort of like citizenship, sort of the philosophies and the teaching of like, what makes us who we are, how to work in groups, how to, how to tough things out. A lot of those things. So we don't have a frame of reference. We're just told to do things. And then we're told if we're doing it right or wrong. And it's like, we really need to be taught these things and basically how to live our lives and how to tolerate stress.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Hernandez. I think it's time for the main event. I'm excited for all the value you're about to bring to our listeners. On each episode, my guest and I will go over a series of 6 questions. My goal is to feature many valuable guests in this podcast, including people talking about their mental health, doctors, and influencers. So I asked them this series of 6 questions to deliver as much value as possible. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Many people would agree that the more common or talked about types of mental illnesses are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and schizophrenia disorders. What areas do you come across the most?
I would say grief related to mood. And so I honestly believe that there's a lot of like big trauma and little trauma behind most of the mood disorders that we see, apart from those who really have a strong biological basis. But also there's things that contribute to mood disorders: diet, nutrition, and sleep. A lot of people have nutritional deficits and genetic tendency to not break down certain nutrients that are necessary for optimal, neural communication. And so, you might be starting off with sort of a deficit, and then you go through life and have these negative experiences.
Right.
And then you have a harder time working through them. So then that becomes a template. It becomes a point of reference where you're always going through the lens of that failure rather than learning from your mistakes and relying on your success. And so that contributes a lot to anxiety and depression.
Yeah. And, going back to what you talked about before, how they're so quick to categorize everything as a mental illness, I learned that, it's okay to have a bad day and feel sad. It doesn't make you depressed.
Right.
It's normal to be normal, to have some great days, some bad days. It's normal.
Yeah, it's normal. And then we all sort of have a range where we bounce back to from your highs and your lows. And when people have difficulty bouncing back and have extreme highs and lows, then that is, indicative of more of a biological process where somebody has a hard time regulating their mood.
Absolutely.
So then that's more along the lines of an illness. But you still, even with a person with an illness, with difficulty regulating their moods, those experiences, the body responds the way it was designed. So I've worked with people who have bipolar illness, and some of those extreme experiences get stored as trauma. And that becomes the point of reference. And so we work through that trauma and work on building the internal tools to help, increase emotional awareness, increase a range of emotions, and increase the ability to self-regulate.
Absolutely. Now that you're working on all those things, helping the patients, helping everybody that you practice with, when did you first decide a career was relating to mental health was for you? When did you say this was the work I want to be doing?
Well, my dad is a Vietnam vet. So therefore,
Awesome.
I'm the combat trauma expert.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why I love the Army. It's to me, it's this is what I grew up around, and this is my way to serve and give back.
I love that. My grandfather in the VFW, had 10,000 hours before he passed away. So we have great respect for all armed forces. So I love what you're doing. I think it's great. When I heard about your niche, especially with mental health, I thought of all the value that you can bring to the people listening in, because how many vets there are out there.
Yeah, and a huge service that you're doing is helping people to frame what's going on. Because
Yeah.
most of the time people are just, they feel like something's wrong, something's not right, and they don't like it. But
Mhm.
having a way to look at what's going on and having options and what to do, that's how we make choices, we make changes. That's how things change and get better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. But what advice can you give to everybody listening on as what may be considered a potential early sign that they may be developing a mental illness?
That's kind of a tough question because my range of my experience goes all the way back working with kids, and so if you're thinking about your listeners is if you're feeling the same way, um, and no matter what effort that you're making that things aren't changing, you're probably not necessarily um, gonna change anything by continuing to doing what you're doing. And that's where talking to people, getting help, and actually we have the internet. I mean, just you can research it from your phone, and it's just amazing when you start
It's
looking
insane.
what's out there. I mean,
Insane.
there's not a lack of information. I mean, there's so much out there. One area that I would encourage folks to look is in functional medicine. Because in functional medicine, before you even prescribe a medication, is trying to look at what's going on in the body. What are the nutritional deficits? What are the things? Because it's like, um, we need certain nutrients in order for our brains to function properly.
All right. I think that's amazing. I mean, I was thinking back to when I first released my book. I'm thinking, how do I get in touch with all these people I'm trying to get my book to? And then on one of my calls, they said, Vin, when I grew up, we didn't have the internet. You can DM, you can email, you can get in touch with people that we never had the options to without the internet, without technology.
Right.
So like you're saying, you can pretty much do anything you want on the internet, and at least educate yourself, I think wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Facebook groups too, where that's a source of support and information. But it's taking some kind of action, because it's really your quality of life.
Hmm.
And the more your quality of life suffers, the more you're going to feel like crap.
Part of the show, one of my goals of this show, I should say, is to improve the overall mental health of the people listening in. What would you say three of the most important things our listeners can do on a daily basis? And I want just three, because I want those top things that on a short-term goal span, what can our listeners do?
Um, if you've heard the talk from Admiral McCraven about waking up every morning and making your bed, ritual, regiment, and routine. Because that sets the tone for your day to get yourself up, to get yourself ready, physical activity, eat, and start your day out early. I mean, a lot of times we stay up really late because we're bored, or we haven't had enough activity or movement throughout the day. Then that starts impacting your sleep and your eating and everything. Um, if you want a high quality of life, it's like you've got to start with these basic things.
I agree. I mean, it's the little things, and sleep. It sounds so simple. Sleep, eat well, but it pays massive reward.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I try to, if I can't, because as an entrepreneur, my hours are usually a little wacky,
Right.
but I make sure my mental health breaks is either working out or taking a walk, or definitely trying to get a nap in, whether it's a small nap or not. I know how important it is, because I know how it makes me feel. Kind of have a second day when I wake up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I travel a lot internationally. I'm speaking, teaching. I'm in different time zones. It's like I went from Santa Barbara to Chicago to Prague, back, and then I was in Mississippi. And it's like trying to maintain that same kind of life rhythm, or what you want to call battle rhythm, no matter where you're at. Waking up, getting started, having these rituals and regiments that sort of like set the tone of the day. So I start my day with exercise and meditation.
Yeah, I'm very regimented. in the mornings as well. I love the flexibility as an entrepreneur, but as far as what isn't flexible, it is structured, are my mornings as well. It makes all the difference how I insert my exercise, and I have my goals for the first morning written down, my
Oh
top
yeah.
3 things I need to attack. My morning goes a certain way because I take it seriously. How I wake up, I make my bed. You got to do it. Get in that
Yeah.
routine.
Yeah, and it's like, it could be, a small amount of movement. It could be going for walks. I mean, it's got to, fit your situation. Um,
Exactly. I agree with the situation because everybody's different. And I know, especially with the brain injury, I learned everybody's brain is different. So we can't tell you how many years it's going to take for your brain, your memory to improve, all of that. So I know what works for some people certainly doesn't work for everybody.
right.
But if that's some short-term initiatives, what can we think a little big picture for our listeners? Long-term commitments, what can our listeners do if you can give me 2 of them?
A huge commitment to your own personal growth. I mean, there's a quote that I like, that we use it in some of our performance work, is the amateur believes they've got it all figured out, but the pro takes the coaching. And if you
Uh,
think about the professional players, it's like you've got a running coach, you've got a hitting coach, you've got this coach, you've got that coach. People look at different areas of their life where they're not performing as well as they'd like to. And you get the coaching for that. It could be in social situations. It could be, work stress. It could be managing your schedule. It could be managing your medications. It's like, figuring out a way to improve. When you have that commitment to personal excellence and development, that becomes maturity. I have a bunch of different degrees, and one of them is in religion. I took Greek. It's in my undergrad, and one of the things that my Greek teacher would point out is like how often we mistranslate things and lose the meaning of it. And there's an idea in our culture that comes from Judeo-Christian tradition that is really a mistranslation. It's like the saying where Jesus says, "Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." An actual literal translation of that is, "Be mature as your heavenly Father is mature." You know, Jesus was basically saying, "Grow up."
Yeah, I think the personal development is extremely important. I can definitely agree with the maturity. I know firsthand with my experiences how it kind of reshaped my whole life as far as social life is included as well, where now
Yeah,
I eat better than I did. I'm more conscious of what I eat. I should say I still will eat if I want to have a piece of pizza, sure, but I'm conscious of, what I eat, how I sleep, how I spend my day. Whereas I used to not mind going out, having a hangover, whatever. Now I really don't have, I want to know how not productive I'm going to be for a few days following.
right. And again, that really speaks to quality of life. And if you want to be sluggish, then you live like a slug. But if you want to grow and you want to mature and excel, it's like you have to make some of these decisions because it's just how our bodies work. You can't decide. It's like, okay, air is for wimps. I don't need air anymore. It's like we're kind of limited in this form, to how it works. But when we learn to work with how our body works, it can really impact our quality of life.
Yeah, okay. So personal growth is a great first long-term commitment. Let's get one more.
um, that same commitment to your personal health. I mean, most of the stuff that kill us is lifestyle related. I
Right.
mean, it's like we have such excess in this country, relative to some of the other countries, but we suffer so many health issues that are really related to lifestyle.
I was reading an article that estimated, I forget where it's from, that by 2030, it will be like 65% of America will be considered obese or something,
Hmm.
just from the technology innovative Uber Eats and Amazon delivering groceries and Publix delivering groceries, Walmart, everybody comes to your house. You don't have to leave your house. And now with the remote opportunities steadily available in the workplace, I don't know. I kind of agree with the article.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, but some of those conveniences I like. It's like if
Oh,
I
of
save
course.
time
Of
and order
course.
my stuff up at Amazon, I've got time to go to the gym. And then if I don't want to cook on the way home, on my way home, I'm heading to Uber Eats and ordering tacos to
Using
meet
it
me.
using it the right way for sure.
Yeah.
'Cause I do it as well. But I'm saying, yeah, why you have to walk to your car at least, or walk in the restaurant, get some kind of steps in.
Well, yeah, and it's like at work, taking the stairs. It's like a lot of times when I'm staying in hotels, I'll just take the stairs just so I can get a little more movement.
It's a great idea.
Especially from being on planes, or I'll go walk around the airport. It's
Smart.
our bodies are designed to move, and if you pay attention to what is going on in your body, you'll start to notice things like how you respond to certain foods, or how your body responds when you're not getting enough sleep. It's just increasing the self-awareness, because we're so goal oriented.
Mm-hmm.
We're working towards obtaining and getting things, especially in a consumer driven culture, that we forget about all the steps in between.
Couldn't agree with you more. But Dr. Hernandez, what are some ways that you plan on raising awareness for the importance of mental health in the future? You're doing all this great stuff. What's next?
To continue to do more podcasts, to write more, actually.
Yeah, let's touch on that.
Well, one of the things I'm working on right now is a chapter in a military textbook and talking about some of these ideas.
That's awesome.
I give talks, and I also train other therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and stuff with these same techniques. And it's really trying to get people's attention back to the human story. We each of us have a personal story, and these untidy bits in our story are the things that we need to work on. And when our stories settle down, then we're focused on the next chapter rather than focusing on what happened before.
I love that. Well, you're paying it forward, it seems, and helping the people around you become better. So I'm all about that. So thank you so much, Dr. Hernandez. I know our listeners are going to see all the value in your episode today. I'm glad I got to be one of those podcasts that you're working on. I see the enthusiasm and your passion for the field and how you're going to spread that knowledge and create a positive change. I really liked how you kind of told us how big your dreams can be. You're traveling around the world helping others, and that's something that my goal is to do, whether it's students and hospital patients is my niche, not veterans. But I commend what you're doing because, like I said, you're the first on my show to have that veterans niche, and now I'm able to add value to their lives. So thank you for that. It's time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for what you're doing. I mean, helping people have a conversation around these topics. This is what we need.
It's
we
the
need
start.
to talk.
It's the start of everything. But it's time for the last word. I do this in my other podcast, what it's really like to be an entrepreneur too, because I want our listeners to really get to know my guests. Is there something you want to end the show with, share with our listeners that we didn't touch on today?
That we need to talk, but we also need to listen.
I hope this platform allows me to do both those things. And like I said, it's just the start. I'm hoping to have more people be open to speaking about their mental health, because then it's that much more lives we can touch and help people's days get better. I know for every step of the way, when someone helps you, it goes a long way. It makes your day better. It's easier. We got to help out.
Yeah, we're designed like that. We're social creatures by nature. That's why we need this kind of interaction, and we need to, work together. This whole myth about pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, it's like that's individual hard work, but everything that I've accomplished in my life has been with other people and as being part of a group, part of something. And I've met some of the most amazing people doing this work.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing your social media website or ways for our listeners to follow your endeavors, request your services, perhaps an email as well?
My email is docdiego@earthlink.net. It's DOCDIEGO@earthlink.net. And you can find my website is balancedlivingpsychology.com. And you can also find that on Facebook as well. And so I have a couple of Facebook pages. One is Mind Body Approaches to Military Transition. The one is for my practice. And then the other one is I also do mind, body, and wellness retreats, Greece, Italy, South America, other places like that. And that's called Transformative Getaways.
That's amazing. You're involved in so much. And remember, everybody, check out the show on Instagram and Facebook at A Mental Health Break and on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. I'm at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube, and my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption on Amazon now, but DM me or email me. I want to hear what you think. If you like today's episode, please continue listening and rate A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering guests for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci.